The document slid across the table without ceremony. No apology followed it. No explanation. Just a pen placed carefully on top, angled toward him as if the decision had already been made. The prenup was thicker than expected. Clauses stacked like barricades. Asset protections. Future earnings carved away with surgical precision. A separate life drafted in legal language. She didn't look at him when she said it was necessary. Her voice stayed level, professional, already practiced. The $9 million deal was entering final negotiations. Investors wanted certainty, risk mitigation, clean lines. He noticed how she said investors instead of we. A silence settled between them, heavy but controlled. The kind of silence that assumed compliance. He felt something collapse, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a dull internal shift like a beam cracking inside a wall no one inspected anymore. He turned a page and saw the clause that froze him. Any claim to future equity was severed. Any say in strategic decisions gone. Marriage reduced to an asterisk beneath her assent. She finally looked up then. Her eyes searched his face, not for consent, but for signs of resistance. There were none she could read. He thought of the years that had built them here, the quiet agreements never written down, the late nights when her confidence had faltered and his had steadied her. None of it existed in the document. She said it wasn't personal, said it was standard, said everyone at her level did this. At her level. He signed nothing. He asked for time. She nodded, relieved more than disappointed, already believing the outcome was inevitable. When she left the room to take a call, the pen remained. Waiting. He stayed seated long after the door closed, staring at the final page. His name was printed beneath a line meant to bind him. Above it, hers appeared already signed. She hadn't mentioned the approval process. Not once. Not the final gatekeeper. Not the regulatory committee that would review the deal structure before release. She didn't know he chaired it. The realization didn't bring satisfaction. It brought a slow, tightening weight. The kind that came with knowing the ground had shifted and pretending it hadn't would cause something irretrievable. He closed the document carefully, as if the paper itself could bruise. Outside the glass walls, assistants moved with rehearsed urgency. The machine was already turning. His phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number. They're rushing this. Be careful. He looked at the door she had exited through, then back at the pen. Nothing in the room moved, but the collapse had already begun. And somewhere beyond that silence, the deal was accelerating without her knowing who held the brake. The message stayed on a screen longer than it should have. No name, no explanation, just a warning delivered without urgency, which made it worse. He didn't respond. The next morning, he arrived at the office earlier than usual. The committee floor was quiet, the kind of quiet that suggested decisions were made elsewhere before reaching these rooms. He reviewed the preliminary filings alone, scanning for anomalies he hadn't expected to find. They appeared quickly. Deferred liabilities reclassified. A valuation assumption resting on a regulatory exemption that had expired 6 months earlier. Language softened just enough to pass a casual read, but not enough to withstand scrutiny. The deal wasn't fraudulent. It was aggressive, confident, built on the assumption that no one would slow it down. He leaned back, eyes closed, letting the pieces align. Her insistence on the prenup, the urgency, the way she had spoken as if momentum itself were a shield. A knock interrupted the silence. A junior analyst stood in the doorway, hesitant, low status, easy to overlook. Her badge still bore the temporary stripe. She didn't step inside. She didn't sit. She spoke carefully. There's a discrepancy in the escrow timeline, she said. It doesn't match the board memo. He watched her closely. She hadn't come to impress. She had come because something didn't sit right. He asked her to explain. She did quietly. No speculation. Just numbers. Dates. The absence of a required secondary approval. Her voice never rose. Her eyes never left the document. When she finished, she waited. Not for praise. For instruction. He nodded once. Told her to log the concern formally. Asked who else had seen it. No one, she said. They told me not to slow it down. They again. He dismissed her with a brief thanks. She left without looking back. By midday, the pressure arrived. Emails framed as clarifications. Calls masked as check-ins. The language was always respectful, always neutral, always urgent. Her name appeared repeatedly in the headers. She hadn't contacted him directly. That absence felt intentional. He remembered something she had once said years earlier during a smaller negotiation. Power only works when it stays quiet. Now it was quieter than ever. By evening, a senior liaison requested an expedited review. No reason given, just timing. The kind of request that assumed agreement before it was granted. He declined without explanation. That night, at home, she moved around him with careful normalcy. She talked about logistics, about press schedules, about how proud her parents would be. She didn't mention the prenup again. He watched her from the doorway, noticing how tired she looked when she thought no one was watching. The cost of carrying something too heavy alone. When she finally asked if he'd reviewed the document, he said yes. And, she asked. He said nothing. The silence stretched. Her expression tightened, not with fear, but with calculation. Somewhere inside the deal's architecture, a fault line had been exposed, and the people who built it were beginning to notice the resistance. The first attempt to bypass him came disguised as protocol. A subcommittee was convened without notice. An alternate review pathway, rarely used, suddenly revived. The request carried signatures from people who knew the system well enough to bend it without breaking it. He shut it down with a single response. Cited precedent, cited jurisdiction, no emotion, no explanation. The second attempt was personal. She waited until after dinner, until the house was quiet and the lights were low. She stood near the window, phone in hand, not looking at him when she spoke. "This deal changes everything," she said. "For both of us." He heard the appeal beneath the statement. Not love, alignment. She said the prenup wasn't about mistrust. Said it was protection against volatility. Said his hesitation made people nervous. People, he asked. She turned then. Just enough. Her eyes were sharp, searching. "The board," she said. "The partners. Everyone who matters." He nodded once. Let the words settle. She didn't raise her voice. She never did. She reminded him of sacrifices, of timing, of how rare opportunities didn't wait for comfort. He thought of the analyst's quiet certainty, of the missing approval, of the pressure that arrived before the questions were answered. He told her the deal needed more time. Her jaw tightened. "We don't have more time." He didn't argue. He simply repeated it. That night, she slept facing away from him. The distance felt deliberate. The next day, the analyst returned with an update. Her concern had been flagged. Not investigated, flagged. Routed upward into silence. She didn't complain. She simply stated the fact. "They're preparing a narrative," she added. "In case of delay." He understood what that meant. Delay reframed as obstruction. Obstruction reframed as bias. By afternoon, an ethics inquiry was opened. Anonymous. Vague. Focused on potential conflicts of interest. His name wasn't mentioned directly. It didn't need to be. The hidden enemy wasn't a person. It was a system trained to protect momentum, to neutralize friction without acknowledging it. He recused himself from the inquiry preemptively. Transparency as armor. The move unsettled him. That evening, she confronted him again, this time without distance. "You're putting me at risk," she said. Not angrily. Precisely. He looked at her and saw the cost of being seen only as useful. The weight of a future built on silence. "I'm trying to keep you from something you don't see," he said. Her expression hardened. "I see everything." He realized then that she believed that. That was the most dangerous part. The inquiry escalated. The deal stalled. The pressure sharpened. And somewhere between the documents and the denials, the truth was preparing to surface, whether either of them was ready or not. The evidence arrived without announcement. A revised projection surfaced during a routine audit. One version submitted to investors, another quietly circulated internally. The differences were small, strategic, enough to shift liability away from decision-makers if the exemption failed. The analyst brought it to him without commentary. Just the files, just the dates. He submitted them through formal channels. No accusations, No conclusions, just documentation. The response was swift. A closed-door meeting was scheduled. Attendance limited. Language careful. The tone neutral but tight. She wasn't invited. The committee reviewed the materials in silence. Questions were asked. Answers deferred. The system absorbing impact. By the end, the deal was paused pending further review. Officially, quietly, the inquiry into him was dropped the same afternoon. No explanation. No apology. At home, the air had changed. She stood in the kitchen, hands resting on the counter, staring at nothing. Her phone lay face down, unused. "They know," she said when he entered. Not a question. He nodded. Her shoulders sank just slightly. The cost of understanding arriving all at once. "They told me it was covered," she said, "that the exemption would be renewed." He waited. "They told me the risk was theoretical." He still said nothing. The silence pressed in, no longer strategic. Just heavy. "They used me," she said finally, not with anger, with disbelief. He saw the truth land, not as betrayal, but as recognition. She had been valuable, not protected. The prenup lay untouched on the table where she had left it days earlier. "I didn't know you had final approval," she said. Her voice was quieter now. "You never said." "I didn't think it mattered," he replied. She laughed once, bitter and brief. It mattered to everyone else. The deal unraveled over the next week. Not publicly, not dramatically, just enough resistance to make it untenable. The board issued statements. The partners repositioned. The momentum dissolved. Her reputation survived. Barely. Altered. One evening, she packed a bag. Not permanently. Not temporarily. Just space. As she stood at the door, she looked at him, not with blame, but with a question she didn't ask. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't defend his choices. The truth had done its work, and now it was taking its payment. The house felt larger after she left. Not emptier, just quieter. The prenup remained unsigned. Eventually, it was folded and placed in a drawer neither of them opened again. Months passed. The deal became a case study. Redacted. Anonymous. A lesson without names. The analyst received a permanent position. No mention was made of why. He continued his work. The system adjusted, as it always did. She returned eventually. Not as before. Something between them had shifted, subtle but irreversible. They spoke more carefully now. Not less. Just differently. One evening, they sat together on the balcony, watching the city settle into its night rhythm. No phones. No documents. "I used to think being right was enough," she said. "That if the outcome was good, the path didn't matter." He listened. "I don't think that anymore." He nodded. No agreement offered. Just presence. The truth hadn't restored what was lost. It hadn't rewarded anyone. It had simply arrived. And in its wake, silence no longer felt like safety, just the space where integrity either stood or didn't. The city lights flickered below, indifferent. Somewhere, another deal was beginning. And this time, someone would be watching.